Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Harvard Arab Weekend, I would like to welcome you to Transforming the Media into a Tool for Change panel. The past 20 years have witnessed a lightning growth of the media industry in the Arab world, but the evolution of the media has thus far been confined to a few outlets within the Arab countries. While the dominant approach remains conservative in nature and refrains from fostering the necessary but difficult conversations needed for our nation's development. Indeed, several contextual parameters constrain the emergence of these critical conversations. Despite few advances, freedom of speech remains limited throughout the region, and the institutional resistance to new broadcast is undeniably strong, leading to frequent judicial and economic sanctions directed against critical voices. This panel aims to investigate the relationship between media and social change. Moderating this panel today will be Professor Mele of the Harvard Kennedy School of Politics. Professor Mele is a leading expert in the integration of social media and Web 2.0 with politics, business, and communications. His book about the internet and power, The End of Big, was just released this May. Without further ado, help me welcome Professor Mele.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to see everyone here today. We have a big crowd. I'm going to encourage you to post questions in a moment, but first I'm going to introduce our panelists and then set the stage a little bit. Immediately to my right is His Highness Prince Fahad Al-Saud. He's the founder and CEO of New Arabic Media, Naam Games, a tech-led, games-oriented incubator dedicated to building, shaping, and supporting Arabic entertainment online. He's known for his work at Facebook and for building and solidifying the website's Arabic version. He's also the co-founder of the popular app developer Epiphany and has become an outspoken personality thanks to his Instagram account, YOLO Fahad. Abu Bakr Hamai is a fellow at the Bosch Foundation. He's the co-editor of the Moroccan news website lacom.com. Hamai began his career in finance, co-founding Morocco's first independent investment bank. In 1996, he joined the executive secretariat of the Middle East and North African Economic Summit as a financial and economic advisor. From 1997 to 2007, Hamai was the publisher and editor of the leading Moroccan news weekly, Le Journal. In 2008, he became a visiting scholar at the University of San Diego, where he taught courses on political Islam and politics in the Middle East. He's a well-known author and journalist, published in a wide range of publications, including the New York Times, Time Magazine, El País, Le Monde, and he won the Committee to Protect Journalists International Press Freedom Award in 2003. In 2005, he was selected by the World Economic Forum as a Young Global Leader. He was a Yale World Fellow in 2004, and in 2007, he was a Nieman Fellow right here at Harvard University. And at the end of our panel here is Rami Khater, the executive digital producer for Al Jazeera's The Stream. The Stream is an exceptional television show integrated closely, tightly with its social media community. In the interplay between television and the internet, The Stream taps into the extraordinary potential of social media to disseminate news. It's an aggregator of online sources and discussion. It seeks out unheard voices and has played a pivotal role in Al Jazeera's coverage of world events and social media. In his role there, he oversees all of the social and digital elements of the show and also manages R&D, as well as integrating with all of the Stream's editorial content. Please give me a round of applause to welcome our panelists today. If we were having this panel 35 years ago, if we were having this discussion 35 years ago, and I was to ask you to describe a computer, you would have described something that might have filled the front part of this room. In 1975, a Cray supercomputer cost $5 million at its base price and was only available to the world's largest institutions, to the biggest corporations, the biggest universities, and the biggest governments. Today, there are more mobile phones on the planet than there are people. And smartphones, your average smartphone is significantly more powerful than the Cray supercomputer of 35 years ago. This is a tremendous push of power from institutions to individuals. And that has tremendous consequences for all of our institutions, especially our most established institutions. When we look at the challenges the globe faces, and we look at the challenges that the Arab world faces, it seems as if many of our institutions are struggling to figure out how to manage them, how to deal with them. And in many ways, social media and the power of mobile phones is really disruptive to the established structures of power. And the question is how to manage and what to do with this tension between the established power and the distributed power of social media. One of the things I'm hoping we can really get into with our panelists today is the question of boundaries, some of the topics and subjects that can't be discussed in traditional organizations or traditional power, but are discussed online, and the danger and the opportunity that exists there. I'm going to start perhaps with Abu Bakr Jamai and ask him just to speak a little bit about his experience as a journalist and the struggle between journalism and holding power accountable and traditional power, and then the role that the technology has played in disrupting that interplay.
Okay. In the bio you've mentioned, you've said a lot of things that I'm proud of, but there is a part of my bio that hasn't been talked about that I'm even more prouder. My newspaper has been banned twice in 2000, and my co-associate in Lakum, as we speak today, is being accused of promoting terrorism and of materially supporting terrorism. The reason I'm proud of these achievements, it's because it means that we are attempting to do something, that we are trying to change things, and we're not resting of whatever laurels we might think we have. I think there is one issue that we need to settle at the outset. I wouldn't say that media are value neutral, but they're certainly embedded in an environment. There is an ecology around the media. So to claim that the media will change something, I think is a little bit too simplistic. It's much more complex than that. You have media that are working for the good of the community, and you have media which are destroying the community. And you have to be mindful of that. My experience is, in few words, is the following, is that I was a young entrepreneur, I was in banking, and I thought that my country was seriously politically opening up. And I thought that by founding a respectable, decent media brand, I'll become rich and I'll do good around in my community. I was seriously mistaken because I ended up being bankrupt and out of the country. The reason I'm saying this is because I thought there was a business model, and I think we need to talk about the business model. There is this, I wouldn't say a fad because it's not a fad, it's more complex than that, but this idea that because of the internet and because of the social media, we can do away with traditional media. This is a very serious mistake to believe so. We still need the functions that the traditional media are the only ones able to provide for not our democracies, because we don't have that many, but for any dream of democratizing our region. What happened in Morocco is that in the late 90s, we had a modicum of viable business model. In other words, you could believe that you can do serious journalism and yet be able to sustain yourself and sustain your company. That existed, but it lasted 3 to 4 years. And then the regime understood that the most lethal way of clamping down on freedom of the press is not necessarily to put people in jail. It's not necessarily to ban newspapers by executive orders, as it happened to us, but by attacking the business model itself. And the way they did it is basically by waging an ad boycott campaign. And then they took the oxygen out of our environment, and we ended up dying. And that also helped them domesticate the rest of the traditional press, because they've seen what happened to those who dared to challenge the views of the ruling elites. The reason why I co-founded Lakum, which is a news website on the internet, is because I thought that we might find a business model in doing so. With the news websites, the level of cost is way lower than for the traditional media. You don't print, you don't have distribution costs, you don't have, even in terms of newsroom, you work a lot, you try to use whatever wealth of information exists out there on the internet, on Facebook, on Twitter, and you do your job of curating this information, verifying them, and adding a layer of journalist professionalism, and then you can present a product that is cheaper to produce than if you had a printed daily or weekly. But you still need a modicum of revenues, and even this modicum of revenues does not exist in Morocco. In other words, Lakum today survives because of international generosity, because there is an NGO based in Denmark, which believes in our credibility and basically funds our operations. We are a chimera. We don't have a business model, even on the internet. Now, in the same fashion that the regime, Mohammed VI regime, began to clamp down on us back in '99 by using, or in 2000 by using executive order, which was a kind of a crude repression technology, I would say. Now they are a little bit lost with the internet. So they had to resort to the crude ways of doing things. That's the reason why my associate has been put in jail a little bit more than a month ago. He has been released, but he is still prosecuted for supporting terrorism. So they are reverting back to their crude way of doing things, looking for ways that are a little bit more subtle, with which they can continue to project this image of openness to their own progressive elites in Morocco and for the international arena. In other words, if we don't ask the serious political question, how our elites get to power, how do they exercise that power, we can fantasize about the power of technology as much as we'd like. We won't be solving our problems.
And what would you say, listening to you, you're really a traditional journalist and newspaper editor, and you have this kind of struggle between the regime and holding that regime accountable, holding power accountable, this very kind of traditional role of the fourth estate. What role has technology played in changing that equation? Would you say social media has been an advantage for the regime, for you? How does the technology affect the power dynamics of the situation?
Well, I think we know that the jury is still out on this issue of social media, and if social media in general are more a benign force for change, or they can be used to clamp down on freedoms. But I would say, from my own experience, that the balance sheet is on the side of we take more benefits from social media than we pay a price for it. There is certainly in Morocco very rapidly we had this big scandal this summer where the king pardoned the pedophile. And Lakum was among very few news websites to talk about it, to advertise it, and the traditional press almost didn't talk about this issue. And then it took a life of itself through Facebook and through Twitter. And these technologies allowed the organization of demonstrations in the streets of Rabat and Casablanca. And at the end of the day, the king was forced to backtrack and to admit that a mistake has been made. He didn't go as far as to acknowledge that it was his mistake, but he said that a mistake has been made, which is already a very big step forward. The pedophile has been arrested in Spain. He's Spanish. He went to Spain and he has been arrested there. The interesting fact here is that exactly the same story happened in 2006, and nothing happened while the press talked about it. Le Journal Hebdomadaire at that time, tel quel, which is another respectable Moroccan media, talked about it. There was an NGO called Touche pas mon enfant, don't touch my kid, which talked about it back in 2006. And yet nothing happened. The guy was he was a French pedophile. He was pardoned, was able to go back to his country. What's the difference? I think there were two differences. The Arab Spring, because now our leaders, they are afraid of their people. So if there is a strong showing of will, they have to take account of it. And there was this organized demonstrations that were made possible because there were these new technologies.
And so would you, in hearing that story, it sounds like your media, your news organization, in a sense, provided a leadership role or a convening role that then allowed social media, Facebook and Twitter to mobilize.
Well, yes, because I mean, to take this story again as a case study, the way we got the information, this is an interesting story in that sense. We got a call from Salafi prisoners in the big prison, the Zeki prison, which is based in Saleh. So these were Salafi prisoners jailed for terrorism, and they called one of our journalists and they told him, "This is a shame. We are Sharia-abiding citizens, and we are in jail, and this pedophile is being let loose." So that's how we knew about it. But then we got in touch with this pedophile lawyer. We made some researches. We verified the information, and we began working on how it happened. Because the interesting story is how he had been pardoned, which we worked on. In other words, and a lot of the information we used were taken from social media, from Twitter and from Facebook. But you needed this newsroom. You needed this organizational capabilities. You needed these norms that govern the traditional media, i.e. newsroom, to do that work. It couldn't be performed by scattered people tweeting and Facebooking. You need a critical mass of professionalism. You need norms in order to attain that type of results.
You need process to bring integrity to the news, right?
Yes, and the other big positive addition to the media by the social media is you are kept on your toes. I mean, if you mess up, you're being trashed almost immediately. This is not something we had before. So editorialists it's becoming more and more difficult, to pontificate in editorials, because people are watching and they can voice their criticism, and sometimes and often they're very pointed criticism, which forces us to be even more professional that we can be.
So let's move now to Your Highness, that to go from kind of a very traditional journalist to someone really born and bred out of the digital age, right? A digital native, someone who worked at Facebook to help bring Facebook to the Arab world. And how do you think about the role of social media and technology in shaping political movements?
So I tend to disagree with the importance of social media and what it can do for, at least for the Arab identity and our voice today. I definitely think one of the issues that it has is that it's dispersed. It is all over the place. It is unorganized. However, the content that is there, we can't deny that a lot of individuals, we're smarter, we're more aware, we're more connected, and we have definitely lost faith in traditional journalism, not because it became a business. It became about selling stories, it became about pushing agendas, and it didn't become about doing what's really, really right. Even people that are righteous against a certain point are those, still pushing their own personal agenda. I think what needs to happen, and what has happened with and the power of social media is the potential that it has. The fact that my issues are, always focused on the next generation. This is we're all connected. We're all telling stories. The Arab identity doesn't exist. Social media has allowed us at least an opportunity, if organized and if used properly, to really achieve change. Traditional media, as much as it said all the stories, the thing is, in the Middle East, we are very much aware of what happens. It's not news to us that this happens, or there's, a corrupt government here, or, this person's being let out. That's not news to us. We very much know about each other and about our neighbors. What we don't have is a unified voice as Arabs. And I think social media has allowed us an opportunity for the first time to connect and to do that. And I think the next step for us is to take advantage of what exists now, create a code of conduct, value system, some sort of agreement amongst us as young individuals of how we want stories to reach us, how we want to share, and it's not about censorship. It's about just filtration and about curation. And I think with these tools, it's today I can post a picture or post a tweet and it gets consumed right away and people act on it. And I think that's what we tend to forget. With traditional media, it's by the time the news gets to you or it's delivered to you, it's still the values of that and the pillars of that need to be translated into the digital age. But to bring the digital age backwards, I don't think it's going to work.
And what about, how does that translate to government though? Like how does, when we look at some of the governments of the Arab world, run by a much older generation for the most part, and you're describing a younger generation in the Arab world that is united and has a shared identity on social media. What kind of expectations does that create on the part of a younger generation for the kinds of institutions they expect, the kind of relationship they expect to have with their governments?
Well, I mean, we should assume that all governments are just, right? And if that would working, they'd have a better relationship. And that, the answer to that question would be easy, just go and talk to them, right? But what exists right now is, in our reality, in the world's reality, is not everything is black and white. I think we tend to, a problem in the Middle East and the Arab world is that we feel like we always need to ask permission. I don't think we need to anymore. I think we're solving our own problems. I don't think anybody here wants to create another kind of chaotic experience that we've seen happen in other countries. We don't want that. We want stability. We want to move forward. We want jobs. We want opportunities. We want hope. We want to have a safe environment for our kids to grow up in. We want to have kids. And we are the majority. And I think just that's the beauty of technology is and why it's so disruptive is because it was created for us by us. And until we do that really with our innovations within this field, whether it's storytelling, sharing identity, building a business even, we can't wait. We just can't wait until they come around. We can't wait until they understand, not because of any issues that they have, or the governmental issues or bureaucratical issues. It's just a generational thing. It's just not going to happen. I gave a talk. I used to lecture and give talks on cybersecurity. And I was at the NATO Defense College teaching a class, and it was 26 high military officials, the ones that press that red button when it's time to fire. And the rest were interns. And I was talking about just, the fact that cybersecurity is a present issue. It's not a future issue. And it was just this glazed look in their eyes, and I just felt like maybe I wasn't doing a good job presenting my ideas or my thoughts. So I just wanted to survey the room, and I said, so how many people here have smartphones? And out of 30 people in the room, 26 high military officials, only the interns raised their hands. And at that moment, it became from just like something funny to a real fear. Because these are the people that are making big decisions, and they don't even know how to communicate with this next generation that is actually contributing to the world, whether it's information, content, thoughts, ideas, change. It's one of those it's a new necessity.
So what kind of tensions does that set up then? If there's an older generation in charge that has the power, that doesn't entirely understand the technology, and a younger generation with expectations of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to create and share content. Like, what happens when that meets up with an older generation that doesn't understand that has a different idea about what stability means and what an Arab identity might mean?
I'm not saying this to be rebellious or anything, but it really doesn't matter what they think. It really does. It really doesn't, because what matters is that we do our best to communicate what we want to them. We need to speak our point, not scream it. There's no point in us just getting together and rioting and doing all that. We need to communicate with them by creating, by showing them. When Facebook started, there were issues that were not talked about within the U.S. But Mark Zuckerberg did not wait for Obama or so to come and say, oh, you can do this. He just went, did it, and was. I've dealt with the international compliance, so I've dealt with different governments suing us, whether it's Canada, Germany, Italy, Pakistan, Morocco, like all these. So I've dealt with that, and it's one of those things that you just need to go out, present it in a good way, and hope that they make the right decision and tag along, but don't wait for them.
So what's an example of that? What's an example of that from your experience of a way that Facebook or social media allowed an issue to be discussed or to be raised that otherwise might not have been?
Well, I mean, every issue. I mean, the Arab Spring is a great example. It's how, and what happened after the Arab Spring is even a bigger example. How, for example, in Saudi Arabia, the issue with women driving, real campaigns are happening. At the beginning, it was this kind of just random campaign off, but now it's more organized. They've picked a date. They're doing positive things. People are actually explaining why they want this to happen. Although, and it's great to see a debate between Saudi women that never happened before, and debating each other. They're like, okay, we have priorities. I'd rather be in parliament before I drive, but I want to drive to go to work. So it's one of those things that is, allowing us to have a real discussion, but nobody has really organized that information and presented it. I doubt at this point in time any government really, would be it wouldn't make the right choice by not listening to its people when solutions are presented. We've heard complaints, and I think that's one of the biggest things. We've heard complaints, we have opinions, we have people scattered all around the world doing their own thing, but we have yet to have solutions that are executable in kind of the resources that we have with it, be it that group, that country, that region.
I think, though, one of the challenges of social media and the technology is the way it's good at disruption, but not so good at solution building, right? And so I wonder, take this kind of opportunity to ask, to bring Rami into the conversation here. One of the things I love most about the stream is the way it is this amazing kind of combination of a very traditional medium, television reporting, television news, and kind of the broad participation of the viewing public on social media and how that gets built.
Okay.
Well,
I hope that's a good
question
sign.
Didn't go over well.
Someone does not approve. Before I get in, if you don't mind, let me just say something. At one point, paper was new media. A couple thousand years later, someone put a bunch of pieces of paper together, they bound them, typography, and that was new media, right? The thing is, we had almost exponential amounts of time to adjust to these things along the way. Right now, this stuff is literally happening at a breakneck pace. I'm sure a new app by someone like yourself is being developed right now that's going to change the world forever while we all waste our time in this room. You know what I'm saying, right? So I don't think the point is to try to totally say where the change is going to take us other than that the change is happening. For example, I cannot wait for the day when we stop calling social media social, because all media will be inherently social, right? These are the things this is the way these things work. Plus, we forget social media is more than Facebook or Twitter. It's Skype. It's all these things that connect folks in ways that that could not be done before. The phone was the first social network, and this actually goes back to a previous point. All the discussions we're having today, whether it's news, journalism, whatever it may be, it's all discussions that happen all the time when it comes to comm theory. When you have huge explosions in the amount of information, what's going to happen? The amount of valuable information is actually shrinks, but the amount of valuable information, not the percentage, actually grows a great deal. So when the telephone was first being commoditized, what was the number one complaint? They said, why? So that women can call and gossip and call each other? Why would people want them in a... Okay, well, that might happen, and guys will probably do it too. But the point is the fundamental change that happened with it. So you can just see, all along the way. Anyways, it's fascinating to hear these discussions. So now I will go back to the point. Social media is amazing, and it doesn't have to be disruptive by nature, following the narrative, which we're probably all here to chat about. The fact that it promotes civil discussion in countries which largely do not have civil discussion is amazing in and of itself. So someone said to me earlier, just talking with these fine people at the panel, well, does that matter? Of course it matters. If everyone in a country knows that something is being discussed, granted, it's maybe not changing today, but the fact that everyone knows that and it's out in the public is something in and of itself. For example, the discussion on social media in countries like Saudi and Egypt is far more robust than it is here in the United States. They have leapfrogged governance and communication. So you say, where will governance be in the future? It's not going to come from the United States, no offense to anyone here. It's going to come from another part of the world where they said, we do not have this infrastructure, whether it be intellectual or not, or physical infrastructure to hold us back. The same way in the country of Jordan, I'll give you an example, they're not laying down cable. Why? They're going straight to LTE. So in Amman, Jordan in 2007, you had better reception and more more 3G providers than they did in Washington, D.C. Are you kidding me? Right? The same thing will happen in other areas as well. So whether it be governance, whether it be journalism, etc. So the stream, we like to say, so Al Jazeera's mantra is the voice of the voiceless. So we say those voiceless that didn't have voices in the first place, we bring them on and say, we're going to put you on traditional broadcast media and let's see what happens. One of my favorite examples was the fuel strike in Nigeria. Good Luck Jonathan had, I cannot remember exactly, but essentially martial law one day, takes away fuel subsidies the next day, and guess what happens? So watching social media evolve is pretty neat. So you see the hashtag starting, it's fuel strike, fuel ban strike, and you see like 4 variations. Then someone on about day 4 or 5 got savvy and said, let's put the word occupy in front of it. So then it became Occupy Nigeria. So now it's not just about Nigerians, it's about anyone in the world who identifies with the Occupy brand. And even if they don't agree with it, they somewhat identify with it. And that is part of the power of social media as well. Borders gone. Now, what happens if people decide to put borders in place? And they say, we are going to practice some form of digital protectionism. Well, yeah, you can. You can do it like a place like China does, but China has built up an entire industry, not one-off, replacements. These things take years. So essentially, if a country says, well, you know what, we're just going to block Facebook, it doesn't stop there. It's like discrimination. You don't just say, I don't like this group. It ends up, well, I don't like X, X, and X. You end up having to block almost everything. So then you're in a globally connected economy, it just doesn't work. Either you come up with every solution, or you just accept the fact that people will have differing opinions, or you come up with a really good way of enforcing, whether it be a variation of the DMCA internationally. So I could see a country saying, for the country of Pakistan, we do not want this Facebook page to be available. Something goes in, and then it's made not available for them. So it's a more nuanced approach to blocking. I could see something like that happening.
That happens, actually.
That does happen?
My
Okay.
job.
Okay, there you go. I love when proof is right next to me. But I could go off on a tangent, but I'll stop there for
So
now.
I maybe can ask the panelists if you want to respond to each other a little bit. Like Jamai, I was thinking about when His Highness was describing this, that when there's a conflict between the established power and kind of an emerging generation on social media, the emerging generation just has to make its voices heard. But sometimes that means you can end up in prison, like your business partner.
Well, I'm a bit at an ease in painting this whole story in generational terms. I think there is certainly a generational aspect, But looking at the Arab Spring, yes, youth was a driving force, but youth was not alone. There were other people than youth. There were former, Democrat militants. There were people who were not politicized before, that were not of the same age category that those who initiated the whole protest, that joined the protest. So I think we should be a little bit careful into analyzing the whole process simply through the angle of age. The other thing, and here I do agree with what has been said, is I believe I have this libertarian view that media are also there to challenge the boundaries of the societies. It's not only a matter of challenging the ruling elites, it's a matter of challenging the society. A society breeds by its margins. When you think about new values, when you think about developing new ideas, it's kind of the Schumpeterian, approach, is the destructive, creative destruction. Is you need to allow yourself to think forward, and you do that through people who are challenging the status quo. And I think the media have this. The media, I'm seriously unhappy when I hear about popular media. If you are popular, there is a problem. You need to be a little bit unpopular. You need to challenge people in what they think. Even people who see themselves in your camp. So we need to have this approach toward. That's why I think that, and we journalists are guilty as charged into this, this idea of projecting our profession ourselves as being by idealizing what we are doing. The truth of the matter is we are a bunch representative of our societies. They're the good, the bad, the professional, the less professional. And you cannot ensure that each one of us will provide exactly the type of functions that our community is waiting from us. But as a collection of individual media, we can provide that. In other words, if you are a policymaker, what you need to strive for is pluralism, is to have to keep the system open so you can let this creativity bubble up into your media system, and to ensure by regulation that you have all your voices heard in a way or another.
I just want to go back to the word freedom and how it's being used, and freedom of speech and freedom of expression and all that good stuff. It seems if you are Arab, you will know that we are free to say what is on our mind in the streets, and we've been saying it forever. We just have not been acting on it. And that's, I think, the difference. I think we've convinced ourselves that we are not free, and we convinced ourselves that we are oppressed and we have no opinion. I don't think that is the case. We're here right now. Change is happening, and it's our responsibility to utilize and organize. We are free today. We are free to say what we want, when we want it. It's about what is it we're saying, right? There needs to be a purpose. When you go online, I'm glad that, for example, I'm glad that people here are using Snapchat to send funny pictures to each other. I'm hoping that's what you're sending. But it's, or going on Facebook or going on Twitter, and talking about each other and tweeting pictures and just harassing, and compared to being organized, compared to understanding the value of the tool that you guys are using. And I think, and the opportunity and the fact that you are free. You can go on any of these platforms, and you are now, the whole globe is listening to you. What are you saying, right? And sometimes you cannot silence yourself just because local traditions are a little bit conservative. It's our job to respect tradition, but we also, in order to respect and for it to evolve, we need to address the things that are not working, because it's a new tradition for a new generation, and I think that's one of the things I'm all for the idea that we as a young generation of Arabs are not free, but I think we're just lying to ourselves, because we are here today and we're discussing this.
Let me encourage the audience, if you log on to the Harvard guest Wi-Fi and go to phlive.at, you can submit your questions, vote them up, and we'll ask some of the panelists to take some of these questions.
Actually, I was just going to make one remark. One powerful thing behind the media is identity, and especially social media. So Let me give you an example. Fusha Arabic, proper Arabic, classical Arabic, was not something that everyone spoke absolutely properly maybe 20, 25 years ago. When did it change? When children's cartoons started to be in Fusha. So then the children and the grandchildren are correcting, sithum, when she says something, and that in and of itself, now you have a common core language beyond, for a group of people who maybe could not totally identify. So I'm sure if he spoke in his local Moroccan dialect, I probably wouldn't understand, but in Fusha we could. So even if you think about it in that context, how does media shift identity even for children growing up when it breaks down boundaries? That is something absolutely fundamental. And it means that they can talk in a language that is not necessarily a foreign language like English or French as well. So
what does that mean then for trying to create the kind of discussions that have to happen, right?
Sure.
If we think about part of the role of the traditional news media in not just in holding power accountable, but trying to be a little bit unpopular, trying to provoke the kinds of discussions that need to happen, to what extent are the existing media, both new media and old, playing that role, that kind of convening role in the Arab world right now? And what could they do a better job at that?
So I think part of the problem in the Arab world is that there's literally, like, you could count the outlets on on my hand that people will even begin to trust. Someone that, like myself, that believes in plurality of opinion and freedom of speech, etc. I would love if there were 30 Al Jazeeras. This is a great place to start. Whether you like Al Jazeera or not, you would probably like more outlets which you could at least turn to. Now, when it comes to the balance between traditional media and social media, what's interesting in the Arab world is since you have so few outlets that are less than 20 years old, I mean, it really is a battle, and they really can check each other. One interesting thing about Arab media that I noticed is that when it came to the integration of social and technology, they were far and ahead of Western and American press. It wasn't even close. So some networks might say, hey, we put tweets on screen. Well, good for you. They were doing that in like 2009, right? But I believe it's definitely holding them accountable, because the larger discrepancy there is between actual reality and perceived reality is one of the definitions of insanity. And if someone is pointing out, this is going on here, and everyone knows it, and then something is being broadcast here, which is totally the opposite, then they lose legitimacy. And I think over time there will be some sort of balancing effect. Otherwise, what's the point of those outlets? They just broadcast and waste money, and no one believes and listens to them anyways. So,
Your Highness, our first question from the audience talks about, an arrested website creator, detained journalist, no cinemas. These are three kinds of media. You're a member of the royal family. Can you play an effective role to increase media freedom?
That's why my company is called New Arabic Media. So I want to have the opportunity to create and share and provide a platform where honesty and transparency and identity is communicated. The issues here are unfortunate, especially the cinemas one that actually breaks my heart the most. My friend was also detained, who was a journalist, a YouTuber. So I've been through that with them. However, what we need to recognize is whether or not, you support or not support, there are laws and there are regulations and there's policy. So that's what it is. We need to make sure that if you do want to affect change, go to law school, become a policy changer, create change that way. Because at the end of the day, it hurts, because as a compliance, in charge of international compliance when I was at Facebook, I had to block certain content, or I had to allow certain content in certain countries based on their laws and regulations, even if I didn't agree with. For example, Hamas is considered a government in the Middle East, but per U.S. standards, it's not terrorist organization. I had to remove content because there are standards that we have to adhere to, because there are laws and regulations as a company we follow. The same thing applies here. It's illegal in Egypt to speak against the government. You go talk to the person who created that law, right? That's what your issue is. Not that you can't do it. It's that it's illegal. And every single person here has broken the law in one form or another, and that's how you catch. right? So that's, I think, where we need to really kind of identify what it is the issue, solutions, right? So what I'm doing, and I hope to encourage, if people follow me on social media, they very much know my point of view. And I'm using myself as a test dummy and putting myself out there because I feel at the end of the day, no matter what it is I do, as disruptive as it is for the benefit of my people, my country, and myself. So it's about just, again, getting organized, getting a plan, and understanding what are really the issues and why is what's happening.
Hamai, kind of fascinating question. Why has investigative journalism, which has been a force of change throughout history, failed to thrive in the Middle East?
Well, may I just make a comment on what has just been said? You know,
Please.
I'm very admirative of the work that you're doing, and I do respect that a lot. But I have to disagree with you just said, because your argument leads us to believe that those who are breaking the law are not doing the right thing. I don't believe that the youth that took to the streets during the Arab Spring had to go to law school before challenging Ben Ali or Mubarak.
I agree with you. However, it is not that they're not doing the right thing. The laws are wrong. So what you need to do is challenge the laws that are wrong. That's the problem. It's not about you knowing. Not everybody needs to be well-versed, but everybody needs to know what's wrong and right and what is legal and not legal in their country.
The problem is that what's legal is not necessarily what's right in our countries.
Exactly, and that's why you need to change it by going to law school and getting educated on what is right.
Well, it's not. Well, I think you got my point. There are situations. There are people like Gandhi, Mandela, who talked about civil disobedience. When you are faced with power elites, with kleptocratic elites, sometimes the only way left for you is to take to the streets. I'm not advocating violence. I'm not advocating killing people, but there are situations where that's the only way to change things. And you mentioned that we are able to speak freely here. Talk to the Americans about how they got the revolution, how they got the democracy to begin with.
I wouldn't go to them for a lot of advice, though.
Okay. Sorry, what was the question you asked?
Well, the question is,
Investigative, yes.
We can keep on this track.
Okay. No, investigative, it brings me back to this whole debate between traditional media and new media, or not new media actually, because when I was depicting or describing news website, I had in mind traditional media, in fact, not printed media or audiovisual media. Investigative journalism is the most expensive genre of journalism. So that brings us back to the business model. I mean, what's exactly the business model you can count on to produce that kind of journalism? And it's not only the Arab world which is contending with this issue, with the added layer of difficulties which is dealing with authoritarian regimes, but even here in the U.S., in France, in the Western world, there is a big issue about how to continue to produce quality journalism and to produce a very expensive type of journalism, which is investigative journalism. And there were some interesting innovation recently, like ProPublica, where it's based on foundations, etc. I don't know if it's the way forward, but the journalist community is striving to find new ways of providing this very essential genre of journalism. I mean, clearly, new media has helped. The fact that most of the information is digitized, so you can access information more easily. But again, at the end of the day, you need the norms, you need the infrastructure, you need the critical mass of professionalism and of people to do that work, which is investigative journalism. And vis-a-vis the Arab world, it's the most. Well, I think there are two very subversive functions of the press vis-a-vis our authoritarian regimes. You have investigative journalism because you're not, it's easy to hurl adjectives. It's easy to say this regime is corrupt, this regime is authoritarian. It's much more powerful when you show, when you don't tell. You know, when you investigate and you present your audience with the facts, with the documents that leads them to conclude that they are dealing with a corrupt regime. And that's the reason why these regimes are going after people who are sometimes merely providing facts and information. There is another aspect of journalism that is extremely, or media that is extremely subversive, and I believe it's probably even more subversive right now, is this very simple way of providing a space for polarized people to talk to each other. When you look what's happening in Egypt, when you look what's happening all over these countries which are struggling to get to peaceful, political equilibrium, respectful of their citizens' dignity, you find that polarization is there. The debate yesterday on political Islam was very illustrative of this fact. And authoritarianism feeds on polarization. The reason why we have authoritarianism, one of the main reasons, is that our leaders presents us with a pretty efficient supply of peacefulness and stability by telling us, you guys cannot talk to each other. You, the Islamists, and you, the progressives, are not able to talk to each other. So someone has to step up and maintain stability and maintain peace. So in other words, and obviously, once you have authoritarianism, this is the other thing that we need to I don't want to put a positive spin on authoritarianism, because once you have extractive political institution, you end up having economic extractive institution, breeding poverty, breeding injustice, etc., etc. So there is no way to do away with this discussion, with these debates between in our countries between conservative slash Islamist. This is a bit of a caricature, but for lack of time to develop more. And on the other side, on progressive slash seculars, if you don't have these guys talking to each other, in other words, if you don't have a space where these people can talk to each other, there is no way we can solve this problem of moving from authoritarianism towards democracy in the most peaceful way possible. And here, effectively, the role of the media is subversive toward the ruling elite, but at the same time, is providing the surest way towards change in peace.
I wonder about Your Highness, like when we talk about media, you just started a video game company, right? Yeah. So is there a role for media other than journalism, for popular media? I know that, or mildly popular media, maybe I should say, and in trying to shape the culture and move the culture towards more openness. I think the earlier debate that you were both having was about affecting change from inside the establishment and affecting change from the outside, right? And why did you start a video game company and not a news site?
I did start a media company, and video game is just one form of media that I feel can reach and has influence on individuals. I think it was I call it the vitamin effect. Don't teach someone or tell them that you're teaching them, but trick them into learning. What I focus on, the fact that New Arabic Media stands for Na'am is no coincidence. I made sure that it did. The fact that it was more about ownership of culture, ownership of identity, ownership of self, of story, allowing us to tell our stories. As much as I appreciate what Disney did, I am not Aladdin. I do wear harem pants, but I'm not Aladdin. And I think that's what I felt that I could introduce a new form of presenting who we are. There's zero content. It's about content. Media is content, right? We have zero representation of what it is to be Arab today in any form. When I even released my application, my first game was a game teaching kids from 3 to 7 or 8 how to learn the Arabic alphabet. From scratch, Arabic team built it. It's based out of Jordan. We came to release it. It's called Yalla Huruf. We came to release it, and we found a huge issue. We saw the opportunity of no real content within the App Store as this is going to be golden for us. But what ended up happening, and we became strategic and released it to the Arabic app stores. But then what happened is that most of the users actually had American or British phones because there was zero content in the local store. So I had to it was such a big problem for us.
To what extent do all of the panelists think it's an issue that that the 7 largest companies in the online space, Amazon, Apple, eBay, Facebook, Google, Skype, and Twitter are U.S. based, U.S. owned? To what extent is that an issue in the Arab world?
It's a
For the
huge.
Arab world?
For me, it's a huge issue. It's a huge
Why?
issue because when they create their products, when they create their businesses, they think of them as, and that's what you should do as a company. They think of them, what they needed, their standards, their idea of freedom of speech, their idea. Arabic wasn't a natural choice for Facebook. I had to fight for 6 months to get it there. And I had to fight and introduce a new identity. When they came to release it, they just opened translation to everybody. I was like, what are you guys doing? He's like, oh, there's more than one form of Arabic? So, and these are Harvard graduates, right? And Stanford graduates. So my issue
I was
is,
gonna say, don't pick on Harvard.
I was gonna say, but that was
I'm sure there's a Yale graduate or two there.
never Yale. But that's the issue. The issue is that they just have the infrastructure to reach anywhere, and it's detrimental to businesses in other countries because when I walk into Saudi Arabia, why is the first thing I see a McDonald's? Why? Where is the local McDonald's? Why? We can't. There's no even real opportunities for any innovators or entrepreneurs to even fight, especially let's say designers. How is a Saudi designer going to compete with Dolce & Gabbana and all these big brands? Where also this other thing where we were trained to consume, there's now this eagerness for us to be validated by the West and told that we are okay. And I think that's something that I have an issue with because I don't need someone who doesn't understand me to rate me as what I've accomplished or I'm worthy or not. And I think that's one of the issues that we need to identify with us. Why are we doing it? Why is it happening? How can we stop it? And how can we change?
I think this is absolutely critical, and one thing I appreciated is when he said that video games are media, right? So I think we also have a tendency, and this is I know this is kind of like a newsy panel, but media in general, we're definitely failing, right? So it's not just about the top websites, so it's about the infrastructure that runs the internet. It's about the middle layers and software that's created. It's about the content on top. And at every single layer, it's kind of inexplicable as to why it's okay. Because the one thing we always talk about is how the cost of content creation has gone down to zero. Okay, then where's the Arabic language content? Let's see it, right? So one other point to this is imagine the internet, but it's 1950. And Google is AT&T. And the sell is, oh yeah, you can have a telephone as long as you buy it from AT&T, but you can have it anywhere in the world. People would have laughed them out of the, countries, states, whatever. It's about having alternatives that are built, that are culturally sensitive, that appreciate the needs and wants of those people, and that treat the local language as a first-rate contributor, right? So if you're doing, for example, if you use translation engines and you're going into Arabic, good luck. If you're going English to French, guess what? It's going to work well because the way those systems work is by consuming content that's on the internet. It's learning organically how to translate.
To what extent do you think that the attitudes towards journalists, toward media, attitudes that are about boundaries and censorship and chilling effects that aren't that may not be legal but are about like restricting advertisers, intimidating advertisers? To what extent is that, do those kinds of activities help to contribute to a lack of Arab content?
Well, Steve Jobs' dad was Syrian. And I'm sure you've asked yourself, what would have happened if he married this American lady and stayed in Damascus? How would Steve Jobs have evolved? And it's not only a matter of physical infrastructure. It's a matter of values. It's a matter of independent judiciary. When you are Steve Jobs in this country, toiling over this new character, working on this thing and putting so much effort, you have this guarantee that you won't have some stooge of the regime who will come and take away from you the labor of your work. That's why you put time and you put effort into innovating. In other words, we are back to square one, which are institutions. I completely agree with the notion that we need Arabic content. And I really, when I said that it was not a rhetorical idea, I really admire the work of people who are trying to come up with new apps with Arabic content. I think it's absolutely key, no denying. Now, having said that, the problem with authoritarianism, the problem with extractive policies is that these regimes are committing a massive IQ genocide in our countries. We do have the energies, we do have the intelligence, but if we don't have the right institutions, well, it'll be gadgetry, it'll be gimmickry.
So we have about 15 minutes left, and I think we have a microphone, and we can take some questions from the audience. I'm going to ask you to be brief in your questions. If you're not brief, I will cut you off. All right? Right here. Let me read.
How does typing in Arabizi influences Arabic content on the internet, especially that people use different characters depending on what sort of region they come from? What Arabic dialects do they speak?
So one of the biggest challenges, my first company that I ended up selling was a gaming company as well, and we took heritage games from around the world that have been played for generations and introduced them in a new form and allowed a chat technology which allows you to communicate in your native tongue and then auto-translate it. And one of the issues that I faced there was the same issue why all right-to-left languages were a big thing for programmers and developers because it was just difficult. It was difficult and there was not enough incentive to invest in those kind of, because you have to create mirror technology. Everything needs to be mirrored. So it is a huge feat when you know, as a startup, there's a lot of money that goes into it. However, it's not possible. And it's about putting more out there and figuring out different fonts, different ways to engage people, to share. And it's going to be, excuse my language, shitty for the first couple of years, but until we figure out, I mean, if we think about how before Mac, you know, typing on the internet looked like a robot did it, which it did. It was like just so standard. So we can't just jump to that right away. We need to fix the technology, create content, make mistakes, and then move forward.
Yes, I just want to congratulate the panel. It's just a wonderful topic, and it's been handled very nicely. My question, I don't want you to take it the wrong way because I really do love Arabic culture, but given that so many of the regimes have families that own the media, and with retina technology and corruption that applies laws in different ways depending upon who is breaking the law, how has the use of Facebook in particular been embraced so enthusiastically in these regimes that go after people who are going against the government? It really surprises me that people are so trusting that what they say will not be used against them or their families.
That's a risk you have to take. Unfortunately, and that's one of the issues that I had. There was, again, we go back to the companies that are creating these tools, right? They're infiltrating, that's what it is, infiltrating different customs and cultures, but not really taking into account with the issues that are, you know, I have friends in Egypt that were arrested. I have friends in Lebanon that were arrested. I approved the January 25th page. That was the last thing I did at Facebook, and as a result, Wael Ghanem was arrested. So it's one of those situations where you just, we are, it's not news to us that this happens. We recognize it. And because we recognize it, that's why we took to social media. It's one of those things that it's just part of it. It's part of change. It's part of a revolution. It's part of the next wave of information is putting ourselves out there. We have to die for what we believe in. If you don't believe in that, then you are useless. It is. It is. You have to be.
Right there.
Thank you. You said earlier that the social media has been used pretty much for disruptive rioting, but we need to stop rioting and not stop rioting, but also create solution and give a voice to solutions, challenge people in a more positive way. Yet in the media, we don't hear that. We only, it feels like we only focus on the negative, the rioting, and we don't give a voice to positive thinkers, people that actually propose solutions. They kind of put on the side. What can media do to give a voice to people that actually bring solutions?
So I think we do both, right? So here's the thing, you know, people joke when they tune into Al Jazeera English, it's the doom and gloom news, right? You know, who's dying where and what's going on. But even at my show, The Stream, we bring a lot of voices to the fore that you would not hear traditionally, right? And that would be the person who did set up the Facebook page, because usually it becomes news after whatever events have taken place, whatever it may be. We did Saudi Women to Drive like 2 years ago. And when they were covering it on CNN, I was thinking, you know, congratulations, 2011, right? So, and you know, we had the woman who had originally kind of put forth the petition on into the fore, and she spoke her angle to a global audience. So what people usually say at that point is, you know, these are fringe people. You might think, you know, they're doing well. Others would think they have ridiculous ideas. And I say, well, if they're a ridiculous idea, then the whole world just saw how ridiculous that was. And if it was great, then they just saw how great it was. But I actually think we do that a decent amount. Not all the time, but it does happen. Right.
Well, here we're talking about systems where you have a modicum of freedom. And in that context, it's a very profound question you're asking, because the incentivizing systems we come up with to have beneficial media for our communities, which are in fact the market. You have this process in the 19th century called the commercialization that led to the Hearst of the world and the Pulitzers and et cetera, and then to the media as we know them today. And you have public service media, the epitome of which is the BBC. And where in the market, you know, you have this saying, when it bleeds, it leads, or it's because it's your demand, you guys. And since we are beholden to the market, and the way we survive economically is by providing you with what you want, then maybe we misunderstand what the audience is looking for. But at the end of the day, you know, that's economically speaking, these are the successful media. And I'm not saying it's not a problem. I think it's a problem. I do believe also that it might not be as a big problem as we believe, because, you know, whenever this is a debate we have in the Arab world and that we had in Morocco, that when we had this modicum of liberalization, we've seen a proliferation of substandard journalism. And people would say, look, we gave them freedom, look what's happening. Well, the most widely circulated newspaper in the UK is The Sun. You still have The Economist and The Financial Times. So in other words, you have to be tolerant of what's not really good to be able to get what's good, and you do get what's good. So we have to be a little bit, you know, wiser about how to deal with this sensationalism phenomena, and be mindful in our part of the world not to give it as a weapon against us by authoritarian elites.
I just want to add one thing, is that we need to understand that for a lot of media outlets today, it's not reporting, it's not media, it's entertainment. So good stories don't sell. Conflict, drama, we've become so desensitized. It's become just random information and sensationalizing certain things. And we're still talking about, you know, today we're talking about one topic, and then tomorrow another, and we feel just as involved about it. We have to answer to ads. You have to answer to a board of individuals. That's why you're not seeing what you want to see. And it's something that we have to understand. It's not happening just in our region. It's a global thing. We look at just popular music, for example. Anything that's consumable, anything that's now become a business, is about making money. So telling you that people are making peace in Somalia or wherever is not going to get the views that they want to pay the big bucks for, these actors that call themselves now reporters on TV. So you change it if it doesn't exist, create it, right? If the platform doesn't exist, create it. Force yourself by having utilizing these tools I'm here sitting in front of you because of my Instagram account. So that's, I've never been on any real media outlet, that was kind of pushing me or anything. I've given interviews, but I've voiced my opinion on Instagram, on Facebook, and it's gotten me attention, positive attention, because you build followers and because it's immediate. Because you think something, you put it, people interact with it right away. The issue with the traditional media that I have is that it's the lag time. And from getting a story to presenting it, so many things could have happened. And it's this very old school. It's not that it's wrong, it's right, but today we live in a very immediate age. So it's the times that have changed, it's forcing us towards that.
See, that's very interesting, because one of the biggest accusations against the media is that we jump to our gun too fast. And because we have
to conclusions too quickly.
Because we have that type of pressure, because it's a demand from the audience that you need instant news, which forces us sometimes not to follow our standards and not to follow our norms. So again, we are in this. But in recent times, the two biggest media phenomenon or issues were WikiLeaks and the News of the World scandal. Let's look at what happened in both of them. What did Julian Assange and the WikiLeaks people do when they got this trove of information? What did they do? They resorted to whom? They resorted to the New York Times, to the Guardian, to Der Spiegel, to El País, and to Le Monde. And they asked this collective wisdom to help them sort out and contextualize this trove of information. So we needed these brands to be around to be able to make sense of this information. What happened in the News of the World scandal? Who exposed the News of the World scandal? The Guardian. In other words, the system is also generating its proper defenses. So I think we should be critical, but at the same time, we should not throw the baby with the water. With the
All right, we'll take one last question. This is our last question.
Thank you so much for coming. My question is somewhat philosophical in nature. Do you think the growth of the internet represents an emergence of a new public sphere, as described by Jürgen Habermas, for example?
The internet is the growth of the new public sphere.
One thing I love to say about what we do is that we take the hyper-local global, right? So events that maybe used to be discussed in a house will become part of a discussion at the global public sphere via a hashtag. Usually those hashtags are 75% of the time in English, 22% of the time in Spanish, and 3% of the time in French. Right, so just to get back to the point of Arabic media, but
it's a conspiracy.
Why me? Why me? Right?
It's the Arabia program.
I see you guys. I see you guys. No, but one amazing thing about this, the global public sphere, is identity and concern. Let me give you an example. I used to say Hosni Mubarak was the unluckiest man alive because he got sent out, not just by Egyptians, literally by the globe. Yeah. Everyone was watching. Mubarak was trending for God knows how many days in a row in pieces of Montana, right? This is the global public sphere in action. People were learning about something they had no idea would be buried in Encyclopedia Britannica on their shelf. So in that sense, I think it's amazing. What content ends up going to the top, who knows? But the fact that the discussion is happening is in and of itself an achievement. So
Abu Bakr, you want to offer any final thoughts?
I'd like to seize this opportunity by asking my fellow Arab friends, you are the brightest. And many of you will go back to your countries, and I have a request, a demand. Please don't forget your spine in the US when you go back to your countries. Thank you.
I think what I want to leave you guys with.
Please, silence.
Yeah. What I want to leave you guys with is to understand that it is in your hands. And more than ever, today, one of you will change the world, right? So the next time you get online, you need to really think about what you are about to do and what you can do. And I'm not saying you need to like hold like signs and walk and pick and that should be your life. But now you have an opportunity to present the other option. So when someone says, all Arabs are this way, I can point to you and say, no, we're not. So be the other in this sense, because I think it's now or never. This is our time, and if we waste it, it's that we have nothing. You have only ourselves to blame.
So there is now going to be a coffee break followed by the keynoted aims. But before I let you go, please join me in giving both our audience and our panelists a very warm